The desert was unforgiving, a vast stretch of barren land where hope seemed to wither under the relentless sun. Raheel wiped the sweat from his brow as he trudged through the dust-covered path, carrying a bag of wheat flour on his shoulder. The wind whipped across his face, dry and harsh. His heart beat heavy in his chest, each step a reminder of the never-ending struggle. He had been walking for hours, but there was still no sign of the village where he hoped to sell the flour for a small amount of money. His worn sandals barely protected his feet from the scorching heat that rose from the earth. The distant hills, once familiar, now seemed like unreachable barriers to a better life. Raheel had dreams of a future where he didn't have to worry about where his next meal would come from, a future where his daughter, Miriam, wouldn't have to go to bed hungry. But dreams often felt like illusions in the face of reality. Raheel was a single father. His wife had died giving birth to Miriam, leaving him to raise their child alone. There were days when he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him, but he had learned to survive. For Miriam he would endure anything. She was his heart, his reason to keep moving even when it felt like the world was standing still. The day was beginning to fade into evening and Raheel was starting to lose hope. The bag of flour felt heavier with each step, as if the desert itself was testing him. He had come this far, but would he make it back with something to show for his effort? Or would it be another day wasted in this endless cycle of struggle? Just as his feet were beginning to drag, a distant cry pierced the air. Raheel froze, his heart skipping a beat. It was faint at first, barely audible over the wind, but then it came again, louder, more desperate. He stopped, straining his ears. There was again. A scream. A child's scream. Raheel's pulse quickened and without a second thought he turned towards the sound. He didn't know where it was coming from, but he couldn't ignore it. He couldn't turn away. He ran. The sand kicked up around him as he sprinted, his heart thudding in his chest. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert, but he couldn't afford to stop. The scream rang in his ears and he pushed himself harder, faster, knowing he had to reach whoever needed help. His mind raced. What if it's a child in danger? What if there's no one else out here to help? The cry grew louder and soon through the haze of heat he saw something. A small figure, a child, her arms flailing, caught in the jagged rocks of a ravine. Another figure beside her. Another child, both of them desperate, crying out in pain and fear. The two girls, no older than 6, were trapped. Raheel's breath caught in his throat. Without hesitation he rushed forward, climbing the uneven rocks as best as he could. The desert was harsh and the ravine was treacherous, but nothing mattered more than getting to them. His body screamed in protest as he reached for the girls. Hold on, I'm coming," Raheel called out, his voice hoarse but filled with determination. The first girl reached up to him, her hands trembling. The second girl, on the edge of collapse, looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. Raheel gritted his teeth, his arms straining with the effort. He pulled the first girl into his arms and reached for the second. Together he dragged them both away from the ravine, away from the danger that threatened to swallow them whole. Panting, his chest heaving, he finally reached solid ground where he collapsed onto the sand, the girls still clutched to his chest. He checked them over quickly, his heart hammering as he looked for signs of injury. They were weak, dehydrated, but alive. "I've got you," Raheel whispered, his voice shaking. "You're safe now." The girls clung to him, their small bodies shivering. He didn't know how they had ended up here, lost in the desert, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was that he had found them in time. He couldn't leave them alone out here. Raheel had faced countless struggles in his life, but nothing had felt more urgent, more real than this moment. In a desert where survival was the hardest thing to achieve, he had found something worth fighting for. Without knowing who they were, without knowing their past, Raheel vowed he would not let these girls face the same fate he had seen so many others meet in the harsh wilderness. Raheel had been on his feet for hours, watching over the two girls. The scorching desert sun had begun to dip below the horizon, casting a soft orange glow across the barren landscape. The twins, though still weak, were slowly regaining their strength. They sat beside him, huddled close together for warmth, their eyes glazed with exhaustion. Raheel had shared the small amount of water he had left, carefully rationing it so that it could last until they found shelter. His mind raced, but the weight of uncertainty pressed down on him. Who were these girls? How had they ended up here in the middle of nowhere? He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this situation than just a simple rescue. It wasn't until the evening shadows lengthened, and the wind carried a sudden change in the air, that the answer to that question came. A vehicle, an expensive-looking SUV, appeared on the horizon, cutting through the dust and sand. Raheel squinted, trying to make sense of the approaching sight. He stood up, his legs heavy with fatigue, and shielded his eyes from the setting sun. The vehicle drew closer, and soon it stopped just a few feet from where he sat with the girls. A woman stepped out of the car. Her figure was tall, elegant, and well-dressed, a stark contrast to the desolate environment around her. She was wearing a dark, flowing dress, and her face was partially shielded by a wide-brimmed hat. As she approached, Raheel could see the concern etched on her face. She was worried, frantic even, scanning the area as if she had been searching for something, or someone. When her eyes fell on the twins, her breath caught in her throat. "Sana? Sarah," she gasped. The girls, who had been silently sitting beside Raheel, perked up at the sound of their names. Their faces lit up, though their exhaustion still weighed them down. "Mama," they whispered, barely able to speak, but their eyes shone with relief. They tried to stand, but their small bodies were too weak to do much more than collapse into their mother's arms. Raheel watched in quiet amazement. These girls, these twins, had a mother, and she was a stranger? The woman, who had been holding back tears, now broke down in sobs, hugging her daughters tightly. Her relief was palpable, her hands shaking as she cradled them. Raheel took a cautious step back, unsure of what to do next. His heart was full, but a deep sense of confusion gripped him. How had these girls ended up out here alone? The woman finally composed herself, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked up at Raheel, who was standing off to the side, feeling awkward and out of place. "Thank you," she said, her voice raw with emotion. I don't know how to thank you enough. You saved them. I'm Sarah." Sarah Sattar. Raheel nodded, still unsure of what to say. "I'm Raheel. I was just passing through. I heard them crying and You heard them?" Sarah interrupted, her gaze narrowing. She looked at him carefully, almost as if she was trying to read him. "Where did you come from? How did you find them out here?" Raheel hesitated, glancing down at the sand beneath his feet. "I was just passing through the desert, working, and I heard their cries. I couldn't just leave them." Sarah's eyes softened, and a flicker of something like gratitude and awe crossed her face. She stepped forward, closer to Raheel, her voice quiet but sincere. "You saved their lives. But I don't understand. How did you know where they were? Why were you out here?" Raheel felt a lump rise in his throat. Why was he out here? He didn't have an answer to that. But what he did know was that the girls had needed him, and he had stepped up without a second thought. "I just heard them. I didn't think about anything else." Sarah seemed to accept his words, though there was a curious glint in her eyes. She studied Raheel for a moment before offering him a warm smile. "I'm sorry, I must sound crazy. But you're a stranger, and yet you saved my daughters." She paused. "You must be a good man." Raheel, despite his humble nature, felt a rush of pride at her words. The way she spoke to him was different than how others did. He had never been treated this way before, like he mattered. And in that moment he realized that something deeper was unfolding. But the surprises didn't end there. Sarah, after a few moments of gathering her thoughts, turned to the girls. She gently brushed their hair out of their faces, a mother's tender gesture. "I don't know how to repay you, Raheel," she said, looking him in the eyes. "I owe you my daughters' lives. Please, come with us. Let me take care of you. You've given me back everything I almost lost." Raheel stood frozen for a moment, taken aback by her words. This was a woman he had just met. He had no idea who she truly was, and yet she was offering him something he couldn't quite comprehend. "Come with you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Sarah replied. "Please, let me take you back to my home. I want to help you. I want to show you that there's more to this world than just struggle." Raheel's heart skipped a beat. This woman was offering me something more than I could ever dream of. But why? He glanced at the twins, who were now asleep in their mother's arms, and then back at Sarah. Her face was kind, but something about her calm demeanor made him hesitate. Was this too good to be true? "I don't know," Raheel muttered, his gaze drifting away. "I'm just a poor man. I don't belong in a place like that. But Sarah's eyes were steady and her voice was firm. You don't know what you belong to yet. Just come with me. I promise you'll understand. Raheel had never been one to easily trust people, especially strangers. His life had been built on a foundation of hardship and survival, not promises of comfort or a better future. Yet as he sat in the passenger seat of Sarah's luxury SUV, his eyes glued to the passing desert landscape, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in a way he couldn't yet comprehend. The journey was long and the silence between them was thick with unspoken questions. Sarah, sitting behind the wheel, was focused on the road ahead, her hands steady as she maneuvered the vehicle with ease. Raheel, on the other hand, kept his gaze fixed outside, his mind racing. Who is she really? He wondered. Why would someone like her care about someone like me? The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. Sarah had insisted on taking him to her home without hesitation, without questioning his intentions or demanding anything in return. The kindness she had shown him was undeniable, but it also felt like it came with a weight that he couldn't yet understand. She had spoken to him like she had known him for years, as if they shared a bond that went beyond a simple rescue. Raheel, Sarah's voice interrupted his thoughts. We'll be home soon. I've arranged for some food and water for you and the girls. He turned toward her, still uncertain. The girls, they're okay? Sarah smiled softly, her eyes flickering with affection. They're more than okay. They're safe now. And you're more of a hero than you realize. Raheel felt a flush of warmth rise to his cheeks, but he quickly shook his head. I just did what anyone would do. She glanced at him, a faint but knowing smile playing on her lips. No, Raheel. Not anyone would have done what you did. Not everyone would have risked their life for strangers. There's something special about you. He didn't know how to respond to that. No one had ever spoken to him like this, not even Miriam. As the SUV approached the edge of the desert, the landscape began to change. The barren, dry terrain slowly gave way to lush green fields, and then to a sprawling estate that seemed to rise out of the ground like something from a dream. Raheel's breath caught in his throat as they pulled through the gates. The mansion before him was nothing short of magnificent, its marble columns gleaming in the fading light, its grand entrance framed by tall, ancient trees. He had never seen anything like it in his life. He couldn't believe this was real. He looked at Sarah, who was watching him with a gentle, almost amused expression. This is your house? Raheel asked, his voice incredulous. Sarah nodded, her gaze soft but filled with quiet pride. It's been in my family for generations. I didn't grow up here, but it's where I've made my home now. They drove up the long, winding driveway, passing manicured gardens and stately fountains. It felt like entering a world Raheel could never have imagined. A world so far removed from the struggles he had known that it seemed almost otherworldly. The SUV came to a stop in front of the mansion and Sarah cut the engine. She turned to Raheel with a serious expression on her face. Before we go inside, she said, her voice low, there's something you need to know. Raheel's heart began to race. What is it? Sarah hesitated for a moment, her fingers tapping the steering wheel nervously. Then with a deep breath she looked him in the eyes. The twins, Raheel, they're not just any children. They're my daughters, yes, but they're also heirs. Heirs to a very large fortune. And I have something I need to tell you about why they were out there in the desert in the first place. Raheel blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift in the conversation. Heirs? To a fortune. Sarah nodded. Yes. But it's more complicated than that. My husband, their father, disappeared when they were very young. I've been raising them alone and I've kept them away from the family business to protect them. But recently there have been threats to their safety. I didn't want to tell anyone about this, but now that you've saved them, I think you deserve to know. Raheel felt a surge of confusion and disbelief. Threats? Fortune? Sarah's face hardened slightly as she continued. There's a reason I had to leave them out there in the desert, Raheel. It wasn't just a random accident. I had to make sure they were safe from certain people. And I couldn't take them back to the mansion without risking their lives. But now that you've helped, I think it's time we tell you the whole truth. Raheel's head was spinning. What truth? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's expression softened and she took a deep breath before answering. I didn't just want to thank you for saving my daughters, Raheel. I wanted to offer you something that I hope will make up for all the pain and struggle you've been through. Raheel frowned. Offer me something? I didn't do this for anything in return. I know, Sarah said, her voice gentle but insistent. But I need your help. And in return, I want to give you something more than you've ever dreamed of. Raheel was about to ask her what she meant when he heard the sound of footsteps approaching the car. A man in a dark suit appeared at the door of the SUV. He opened the door for Sarah, offering a polite smile. Miss Sattar, everything is prepared, he said, his tone formal. Sarah nodded and turned to Raheel. Come on. I'll show you what I mean. Raheel followed Sarah into the mansion, his mind racing with questions. Every step he took seemed to echo through the vast marble floors, the sound amplified by the towering walls and the wide, open spaces that surrounded him. The house was magnificent, a stark contrast to the dusty, barren desert he had known. It felt as though he had stepped into a different world entirely. As they walked down the long corridor, Sarah led him to a large dining room where a warm meal had been laid out on the table. But Raheel's appetite was absent, his mind still struggling to process everything that had happened. I didn't expect all this, he said quietly, looking around the room. I didn't expect you to offer me anything. I didn't do it for rewards. Sarah smiled softly. I know you didn't, Raheel. You saved my daughters. That in itself means more than anything. But now I want to offer you more than just gratitude. She gestured for him to sit, and though he hesitated, he eventually took a seat at the table. Sarah joined him and the staff began serving the meal, but Raheel barely noticed the food in front of him. His thoughts were far away, still tangled in the revelation about the twins' true identity, the hidden fortune, and the mysterious danger that Sarah had hinted at. He hadn't expected any of it, especially not her request for his help. As they ate in silence, Raheel couldn't help but glance over at Sarah every now and then. She seemed so calm, her expression serene despite the chaos she had described. She wasn't just the wealthy woman with a hidden fortune. She was someone who had been protecting her children, facing threats he couldn't even begin to understand. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. I know this is a lot to take in, she said, her voice low and steady. But there's something I need from you, Raheel. Something only you can do. Raheel looked up, his brow furrowing. What is it? The people who have been threatening my daughters, Sarah continued, her eyes growing hard. They're not just any criminals. They want to take everything I've built. The business, the estate. Everything. And I can't fight them alone. I need someone strong, someone who understands sacrifice. Someone who can stand by me and protect my girls. Someone like you. Raheel's heart skipped a beat. Protect her? Protect them? I don't understand, he said, his voice tinged with confusion. You want me to what? Fight these people? I'm just a man trying to survive. I'm not a bodyguard. I don't have anything to give you. Sarah's gaze softened. Raheel, you've already given me more than anyone else could. You've given me the one thing I've been looking for my entire life. A sense of security, of hope. You saved my daughters. And now I want to offer you something in return. Raheel shook his head. But I can't protect anyone. I'm no hero. I'm just... You're wrong, Sarah interrupted, her voice filled with quiet determination. You are a hero. You didn't just save my daughters because you had to. You saved them because you cared. You saw them just as they were and you helped. And that's something rare. She paused for a moment, her eyes locking with his. I want to help you, Raheel. I want to make sure that you and your son never have to struggle again. I want to offer you more than just a place to stay or a meal. I want to offer you a future. Raheel blinked, stunned by her words. He had never been offered something like this before. Nothing even close. His entire life had been defined by struggle. To imagine a life without hardship, without the constant worry about where his next meal would come from, seemed almost impossible. You're offering me everything? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded. Not everything. But I can offer you enough. A home. A future. And a chance to change the course of your life. All you have to do is stay by my side and protect my family. I need someone I can trust. Someone who won't let anything stand in the way of my daughter's safety. Raheel sat back in his chair, overwhelmed. His mind raced. Why me? Why would someone like her offer me all this? I don't know what to say, he murmured, his thoughts tangled. I didn't do it for anything in return. But I don't know if I can live like this. I don't know if I'm cut out for this life. Sarah leaned forward, her expression sincere. Raheel, I understand. But think of it this way. If you can be the protector you're meant to be, you'll not only secure my daughter's future but your own as well. You'll have the chance to build a life you never thought possible. Raheel remained silent for a long moment. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. And then, as if something inside him clicked, he realized the truth of what she was offering. She wasn't just offering him a chance at wealth or comfort. She was offering him a purpose. A way to make a real difference in the lives of others. A chance to redeem not just himself but to help protect the innocent. Finally, he looked up at her, his decision made. I'll do it, he said quietly. I'll help you. I'll protect your daughters. Sarah's eyes shone with gratitude. She stood and reached across the table, her hand extended. Thank you, Raheel. You don't know what this means to me. Raheel shook her hand, his grip firm. No, thank you. For believing in me. For seeing me as more than just a man in the desert. As they exchanged that simple, meaningful gesture, Raheel knew his life had just changed. And though the road ahead was uncertain, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't just a man struggling to survive anymore. He was someone who had the chance to build a future, to protect those who needed it most. And in that moment, Raheel realized that kindness, when given freely, could not only change the lives of others. It could change your own.